Okay, so Martin's asked me to give a sort of personal account on what I think has worked and what hasn't over the last 5 years. I've been at the Co-operative. We've had a fairly sort of dignified panel of directors and CEOs and whatever. I'm actually just a middle manager, so I'll try and give you my perspective. From that basis, you'll probably sense the bitterness and disgruntlement. I think the panel were incredibly polite about middle management. I think internecine fighting between middle managers is the greatest barrier to British business doing pretty much anything, let alone pursuing sustainability. So we'll come into my personal thoughts on how you engage. I'm not sure engage is the term I really want to use, but there you go. The fundamental thing that gets me out of bed in the morning is that if you work with supermarkets are basically pack animals. Most corporates are, but supermarkets particularly. If you can get one of them to do something, or take its fish more sustainably, source its palm oil more sustainably, what happens is over the course of the next year, the rest of them will follow. So you get a real two for the price of one if you squeeze the pun. And that's what basically gets me going. So you can get something done on fish at the cooperative, then the others do it, and vice versa. And I think that's something NGOs should probably pay a bit more attention to, because that definitely happens. And it's evident in other sectors as well. So I'll talk about what's worked and what's not. And then I'll go through a couple of bugbears of mine where I think things are going slightly amiss and aren't working properly. First one is the argument that there is always a cost saving from pursuing sustainability. This sounded very, very nice and convenient back in 2007, 2008, when supermarkets were clawing over each other to prove who was the most sustainable, and you had a really nice narrative that not only are we doing really well environmentally, but it's saving us loads of money. This isn't so good now. And you get found out when you feel like that. And we need to have the bottle to ask for resources and actually face up some fairly hard asks in this area. So in some areas, if you pursue energy efficiency, I totally accept it saves you money. If you pursue waste minimisation, it saves you money. If you develop renewables, wind farms, stuff like that, it clearly makes you money. Get on to other things. Packaging reduction. We've reduced our packaging by over a quarter on an absolute basis. We save about 80,000 tonnes of packaging relative to where we were back in 2006. Every single packaging reduction project I've been involved in has been timely, it's been costly, it's been painful, it's involved lots of infighting, lots of battles with suppliers and between teams and so on. At best, it works out as cost neutral. I'm not saying that it's not worth doing, it really is, and we must do more of it. Supermarkets must be held to account on that, but let's not kid ourselves. It's at best cost neutral. So if something's cost neutral, well, why are you doing it? Because surely you should be pursuing something from a financial perspective that gets you a decent rate of return. So that's the one where it's about cost neutral. When you get on stuff like sustainable sourcing, so things from a biodiversity perspective, like fish, paper, whatever else, as far as I can work out, at least over the short term, that is always more expensive than the unsustainable option, and we've got to confront this, and we've got to have the bottle to fight for it, and push this one, and push difficult arguments that it's about long-term ground position, to push difficult arguments that if we don't pursue it, then we're basically undermining what we're trying to sell on as a business. But that's tricky. You can't argue that all of that is cost beneficial, and you've got to get your house in order on that one. Second one is about arguing that customers always want this, that there's some sort of green consumer riding to the rescue on a white horse. The empirical data on the growth of green consumerism is tricky to pick through. It depends almost who you want to believe. We do an ethical consumerism report every year. 2011, ethical consumerism in the UK had increased by 5.5% to £50 billion. That's up from about £20 billion back in 2000, so it's definitely grown. Within that, though, there's a really mixed picture. Organics were down by about 10%. Fair trade was up by nearly 40%. I'll come back to some thoughts about why that's the case and why one's grown and one's contracted and so on. If you look at other surveys, the Grocer helpfully produced a survey where they said only 3% of people cared about the environment. That was a really helpful one to have hunted around the office in the last few months. Conversely, if you look at Asda's survey, the Greenest Normal survey, they say only 2% of people don't care, and about 70% of people generally do care and have it as part of their wider philosophy of why they buy things and so on. So I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. Why did fair trade go up and why did organic go down? Well, here's a few sort of thoughts on this and how it fits into what we're trying to do at the cooperative. So the first one for me, I think fair trade, very, very well recognised, very well understood in terms of its benefits. It's got probably the highest level of recognition, something like 75–80% amongst UK consumers. Maybe the benefits of organic are less tangible to average consumers, I don't know. More to the point though, what's happened over the last year or so is that fair trade has been pushed out through the supply chain. So I don't actually think this was necessarily about customer demand being that overt. It was that the likes of Cadbury following on from, say, people like the Co-operative, who championed it over 20 years and taken it from being absolutely niche to being something which was there readily on supermarket shelves, had basically taken something and said, actually, we're going to do this as standard. So what they were doing was choice editing. I'll come back onto this in terms of what I think works, and choice editing is number one. And if you look at that, what's then happened, so Cadbury's, the default is basically on a little nice bar of dairy milk that it's fair trade and you can't not buy it as fair trade. You've had others follow, so Nestle are following, Mars are following, and so on. And again, it comes back to this point about pack animals, that once somebody does it, and I think, it's amazing, I wouldn't have thought 3 years ago that we would have had all of these fair trade options basically as standard. And again, this is where it differs from organic. So organic, you're sat there looking at your nice organic veg, then you've got a cheaper non-organic option right next to it. So whereas with fair trade, if you want to go and buy your dairy milk, that's basically what it is. Fundamentally, we've endorsed choice editing. We commit to that very much in our ethical plan. And what I don't understand is why choice editing causes so many sort of rankles within the retail industry and so on, because every retailer choice edits. Fundamentally, the reason you see certain things in shops and not others is because we choice edit. So fundamentally, I think our job is to try and take the bad stuff off the shelves and to try and choice edit the good stuff back onto it. And if we don't have the bottle to do that, then we're failing. I don't believe the idea that we label and we provide consumer choice is the right way of pushing it, because I don't think we've got time to take that approach. And I think that's a difficult message for a lot of people. I think that's ultimately where it is. A few other thoughts about what works. One of the things I really love in terms of trying to push sustainability is NGO rankings exercises. I'll give you some analogies as to how those have helped us. In 2006, we came almost last in the Marine Conservation Society's rankings for supermarkets and their approach to fish sustainability. That created a lot of ructions internally. We didn't like being down the bottom. We completely revised our approach to fish. So we worked with the Marine Conservation Society to look at setting up a sustainability framework by which we moved all of our fish away from, we no longer sourced any of their red fish not to eat. We started working with a number of fisheries up and down the UK to pursue Marine Stewardship Council certification, and we also campaigned with the MCS to get 30% of the UK's seas designated as marine reserves. And that moved us from basically last to being first in 2009 and joint first in 2011. And that's where we want to be. I'll give you another analogy. With Pesticide Action Network's survey they do every other year of supermarkets' approach to pesticides, we've used that as the metric by which that manager is ranked as a leader or otherwise. We've responded to their queries, we've pushed for a new policy, and we came back again as being top ranking in that area. And we use that, we've agreed with the business, that's how you're going to be measured, because they're independent and they've got credibility. What I would say is I think that NGOs are actually lacking in their real fortitude on rankings exercises. The only one that I think's had real teeth over the last year was the Greenpeace tuna survey. It got us to change our policy, it got Tesco to change its policy, they then got brands like John West and Prince's to change as well. And they really went out and they really dished the dirt. Too many NGOs are trying to take a consensual approach at the moment. If I want to push this stuff, what I want is I want the NGO fighting our corner. And if you also, you're all part of a leader group, too many of them now are basically saying, okay, we'll put everybody who's doing something into a leader group and we'll try and be your friends. Doesn't work for me. This is fundamentally unhelpful taking that approach. So, number 6, what do I think in terms of other ways we've pushed things? Transparency. Fundamentally for us, we have really gone to town on sustainability reporting. We do a massive warts and all sustainability report that's been recognised as being one of the most honest and accountable globally. The reason for this is that quite a lot of the time people in big companies tell lies. So the chief executive says, how are we doing on that carbon stuff? Because he or she have read an article about it and think it's important. And they talk to a director and the director says, oh yeah, it's all good, yeah, fine. And that's the end of the debate. What you've got to do is you've got to put this out in public. You've got to give very clear empirical data over time and looking at setting absolute targets. This is the whole point for me, is that basically sunlight is the best form of disinfectant. So I think our approach has been monumentally helped by taking this approach and outing a lot of our problems, outing our performance, and this then becomes your version of the truth, which you use for marketing claims, you use it for press releases, you use it when you talk to journalists, use it in all your consumer-facing stuff, and you know that it's pretty much correct if it's in your sustainability report and it's been independently audited and verified. So I suggest other people take that approach, because we think it's been very, very helpful. Another thought about what's worked. This is the thing about middle managers. I think as much as possible, take decision making away from middle managers. I think everybody was being very nice because they're at sort of director level and saying how they engage and bring people on their side and so on. I think what we've tried to do is we've created an ethical plan. I know we're not the only people to have a plan with sustainability or ethics or something like that in its title now. But where we are different on this is that it's an operating plan which is on the same level as the financial operating plans for our main businesses like Cooperative Food, Cooperative Bank and so on. And it's a 3-year strategic plan which is basically endorsed by our executive and our board, and anything that goes into it has to have the resources allocated in the financial operating plans of those businesses. So it gives you the means by moving away from those horrible battles with other middle managers who are trying to defend their corner and actually getting the right resources apportioned. So what we used to do with our sustainability report was we used to set annual targets, and you'd go and talk to someone who worked on fish or paper or whatever and say, can you do something in addition to the job you're currently doing? And you're not going to get much thanks to it, but we'll stick it in our sustainability report. And you know, they would balk at that. We tried to move it up another level. So, you know, my enthusiasm for the nasty bit of fights with other middle managers is relatively limited. The ones that do well, you take what they're doing to the executive and say, well done. The ones that don't, you grass them up. So that's basically how it works. But taking them with you, I don't know. I think a couple of people mentioned remuneration. This is absolutely crucial. I came to the cooperative in 2006. We had started working then, prior to me joining, with the Carbon Trust, looking basically at energy consumption and drawing up a strategy to reduce it. What changed in about 2007 was that once we had set some targets, the director responsible for property and her immediate reports had part of their bonus package being contingent on hitting energy efficiency targets. The change that brought about was absolutely stratospheric. All of a sudden they actually want to be your friend rather than telling you to go away. So that one is absolutely crucial. You know, I think it's fundamental for our executive. Part of their remuneration is based around our business in the community CR index score. So we've tried to look at having that approach right up to our executive and having people with responsibilities for things like energy efficiency or waste management, having it cascaded down to that. So I think that's it in terms of what I think's worked and what hasn't. The final thing I want to say was I was actually very heartened by the meeting today and the conversations had around the table. I think, you know, there's absolutely no denying that 2012 is going to be a pretty difficult year in terms of pushing this one and sustainability. I get quite a lot of journos phoning up and saying, you know, do you think this is like the early 90s? Do you think this is all going to fall apart? Last time we had a recession, and there'd been a big green wave in the late 80s, you know, it all went horribly wrong in the early 90s. I think there are 3 key things which mean that is actually not correct and it's not a good metaphor. The first one is obviously our scientific understanding of the problems we face are so much better than they were in the early 90s. Second thing is I do genuinely think that consumer awareness of this issue and enthusiasm for it is much better. Give you the sort of dinner party analogy. If I went to a dinner party 10 years ago and I said I worked on the environment people recalled in horror, they're actually now quite interested. So that's changed. And I think fundamentally there are actually properly quantified benefits or products with properly quantified benefits from a sustainability perspective, be it things like fair trade, be it things like MSC or FSC and so on. And that was one of the big problems back in the early 90s, that there wasn't that sort of base there and people made spurious claims and it all fell apart. So the fundamental thing for us is we're going to be relaunching our ethical plan next month. We'll be setting a load of new targets around greenhouse gas reduction, fair trade, packaging and so on. And the fundamental message for us at the cooperative is we're not letting up on this one. We're determined to push it much, much harder. That's what our members want, and we're definitely up for it. So thank you.